And next up, we have Essence, a Divine Dungeon Anthology. There's quite a few authors here, including James Auwaerter, Dennis van der Kerken, Alexis, Keane, Rohan Holbekar, Stephen Willden, Ryan Ball, Raymond Johnson, and of course, Dakota Krout. It is 248 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Limited. There is in the novel description a long list of each description of each little short story. I'm not going to read them off. You can read that there. I will read you the novel description now. It says, Infernal or Celestial, young or old, each has their own path to power. Delve into the world of the Divine Dungeon with a new and old cultivators alike. Discover the Lion Kingdom's beginning, learn the origin of Odin and his ravens, and take a philosophical approach to cultivation. These stories and more included in the first short story anthology set in Dakota Krout's Divine Dungeon universe. So there we go. Like the reviews is this. Like many short story collections, there are always going to be those stories that you love and some that you just don't. That's kind of the interesting, joyous nature of like short story collections. You have these little story nuggets that have the potential to be amazing, to introduce to new authors and new storytellers without really having to invest, hours and hours of your time. These are like 15, 20 minutes, maybe sometimes an hour short, depending on the length. But they have so much like nice potential. I'm always a sucker for a good anthology, and this is a good one. It has a few great gems in there, and on the whole, I found it really nice that I could go back to a favorite series of mine, the Divine Dungeon series. And even though some of the stories were very much not in the same style of Dakota Krout, some of them did a really good job of storytelling. So overall, the novel gets a score of 7.3 out of 10. So I'm actually going to go into the individual reviews for each short story if you want to stick around for that. Starting off with Lion's Start by Rohan Holbekar. This is a short story about a little dungeon dive to save a friend and clean his core. It's not a bad dungeon dive and has some likable characters, and especially like the relationship between the teen characters. I think the relationship between those characters is actually my favorite portion of it. Not an amazing short story, but it does some neat things. So give it a score of 7.3 out of 10. The next one is Legacy of Thunder by Stephen Willden. Gets a score of 7.2 out of 10. It's essentially a Norse and lightning god themed short story with cultivating nation of Asgardia having a special festival and competition that gives lightning essence. It's a cute story, but it was kind of predictable based on the names used for characters. So it was a little predictable. Like, okay, this is kind of a neat twist, but predictable. So a 7.2, still enjoyable though. Flight of the Glitterflit by Ryan Ball. This one actually got a 6 out of 10. It didn't quite work for me. I liked the beginning, which talks about what happens when a cleric keeps adding fire to his ceiling. However, in the main story, the main character must rescue a kidnapped Glitterflit and try to fix his essence problems. However, the end kind of spoiled it for me, because even though like the beginning portion was pretty decent, and it goes into this dungeon core kind of dungeon dive, the end was just so sudden and it was so wand wavy. It kind of ruined, for me at least, the stuff that came before it. So I got a 6 out of 10 for me. It definitely lost me at the end. Splat by Raymond Johnson is the next one. And go Raymond Johnson, full disclosure, is a member of the LitRPG podcast family. He does our LitRPG audiobook podcast. He also writes short stories, and he was picked on his own merit by this particular author and his publication company. But Raymond Johnson wrote Splat, and Splat is the name of the dungeon goblin that keeps dying by being splatted. It was funny with the cute, funny main character. I always like writing Raymond Johnson for the short stories that he's done. And this is no different. It gets a score of 7.6 out of 10. It's cute and it's fun and it's short, and so they're always neat little adorable stories. So I enjoyed that one. The next one is The Spirit Dungeon by Alexis Keane. This one didn't work for me either. And that's mostly because, well, first of all, I should say I like the idea of an alcohol producing dungeon. But the story itself had issues. The actual writing is fine. No problem with the actual technical writing or anything. But it had overly long cultivation details for a short story. I'm like, it's one of those things that if you're reading this anthology, you're probably already familiar with some of the details of the Divine Jinn series. So you don't need these long paragraphs about what cultivation is. And there were quite a few of them in the short story. So they felt like they were unneeded and they were a little repetitive for stuff I already knew. And what really lost me though were the characters. I never really cared about them. So I never cared if they survived the dungeon and got into trouble. And the end was just a bit abrupt to satisfy me. So it just didn't work. Not a bad story. Again, a 6 out of 10 is not a bad score. It's just like, this doesn't work for me. Other people might really enjoy it, but it just didn't work for me. Next is The Hidden Lantern by James Auwaerter. It gets a score of 6 out of 10. This is essentially a cameo story. It doesn't bring anything new to the series or even to the universe. A character is sent into the Mountaindale, and you get lots of main series characters making brief appearances. And you get like a few details, or it feels like it might connect some characters, but it's nothing you've never really read about before. Right? So it's all familiar people, and it's just not much more than just a cameo story. People familiar characters just kind of pop in and out. So it just didn't really work for me. So 6 out of 10. Next is Butcher Boy by Dakota Krout. This gets an easy 8 out of 10. Great. I'm always a huge fan of Dakota Krout as a writer. He's always writes these interesting stories. They usually have some very funny puns, but even putting those aside, he writes good characters that you just kind of enjoy, and this is one of them. It was a story about a street urchin that gets a chance to better himself, just not the way he expected to. And it's it's a great story for me. I thought I love like the subtle world building that was in this short story. Not only do you get the insight into like this particular character's lifestyle and life as an urchin, but also like the larger world building. And again, it's a short story, so it's really always amazing to me how much detail and how much interesting like just little nuggets of like a background information for the culture that really makes it fleshed out and feel like really full, that Dakota put into this like relatively small short story. And it just ended way too soon for me. Like I could genuinely see like a larger like novel from this little short story. And I just wanted like a dozen more chapters to read. And whenever that happens to me, I know it's a great story. So this short story definitely gets an 8 out of 10. My favorite of the anthology. And last but not least is Axiom by Dennis van der Kruiken. The story starts off with a group of kids who get their names in a particular ceremony. And I'll be honest, the beginning of this feels like it has nothing to do with the Divine Jinn series. It feels more like a fantasy coming of age story. However, towards the middle of the story, the connection is finally made back to the Divine Jinn series. There's an explanation of the lore behind what happened in the first half of the novel. And it was really enjoyable. It's just that first portion was like, oh, what is this? I was like, this doesn't feel anything like the Divine Jinn series, Sun the World. But there's a very good reason for that. So if you feel the same way when you're reading the short story, just know that it does connect. So just keep going out with it. And apparently it's also connected to the novel I spoke about earlier about the podcast, a new side story series from the same author. So that might be part of what this is promotional for that particular novel. I enjoyed it though. Eventually gets a score of 7.3 out of 10 for me for Axiom by Dennis van der Kruiken. So there you go. Again, overall good stories in the series. And I like going back to this universe. So overall scores again, 7.3 out of 10.